Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, another listener question episode. I've got 10 questions. Today is Monday, November 4th. Tomorrow is the election, so it shouldn't surprise you. The first two questions or comments are about the election. Just did the episode last week on that. Got some immediate feedback, not all of it positive. It's a difficult subject. But first, thanks sponsors, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. Over the last several months, I've been bombarded by both sides. You could look at my demographic and project possibly what my party affiliation would be, but I'm not happy with either party. And in keeping, I get texts and emails from both sides, and I've reported both sides for junk and spam, and all that does is increase the amount I get, again, from both sides, each one talking about how terrible the other side is, and I'm fed up with it. But on the other hand, like I said, I have voted now, and so I'm done with that. I've also done more than 1,000 episodes, including one 4 years ago. I did an episode about the 2020 election. I don't really want to impart my own opinions other than I'm going to give my sports card insight of what I think is better for the hobby from my perspective. 1,000 episodes, less than 1%, which would be 10 out of 1,000. Way less than that have been controversial enough to get me a 1-star review, which I got on this, or unfollowed or unsubscribed, which also happened. This is not the same as cancel culture. Cancel culture is when you're deplatformed and you're removed from the platform. I have respect for those who write me and say, you know what, I didn't like the way you said that or what you said, and I'm giving you 1 star or I'm canceling. I take that. I receive it. I'd like to earn your trust back, but if you don't listen, I think that'd be hard to do. I think this is the most important election we've ever had as a nation. Of course, that'll be the case until the next one. Each one it's always the most important one that you have, but it's unlike any other one I've had. It's clearly one where many of my friends on both sides are considering the least objectionable candidate. I want to be on the record. I don't like either person. I think both parties have major flaws, not just in their party orientation, but in their policies. So I cannot be in lockstep with either group, but I lean one way more than the other, and you can figure that out. I found this list of 12 issues, and rather than for me to create my own, I thought, well, I'll just take those. And even though it was alphabetical order and abortion was the first one, and I get an awful lot of texts and emails about abortion. The candidates are very different on that. The parties are very different on that. And I have a strong opinion about that, but it's not as impacting of the hobby. So I was tempting to filter through these 12 things through the lens of the hobby. And it became clear as I went through it and was thinking out loud talking, is that I believe the two biggest concerns, and this is my opinion, for the hobby are this potential for regulation, which would be bigger government, and hobby crime, safety, and deterrence. As I said, when you have 12 issues, really people don't rank the 12 other than the top 3, and those are the ones they have a visceral response. And for many people, that's abortion. But for the hobby me is saying, no, I really want to see the hobby have the same entrepreneur-friendly situation where we police our own, and then if there is theft or crime, they are punished, restitution is made, and there's a great deterrence from people doing that. In season, I play golf with a good friend who is my political opposite, and we typically agree on the problems. We usually agree on the goals, but we don't agree on the approach, but we have a very civil and engaging walking of 18 holes, which is plenty of time to hash it out. And he's a great guy. We both want a safe, healthy America that's good for all. That includes hobbyists, that includes poor people, it even includes rich people. It includes everybody without trying to have unfair advantages or disadvantages to certain people. But I've been warned, if you talk about religion or politics at a party or on a podcast, unless you're Joe Rogan, and I'm not trying to be controversial, but these are just very emotional kinds of things. So my first question or comment was from Todd. I'm not going to give last names here, but he said he listened to 1,000 episodes of my podcast, and then he just said, I was dumbfounded when you tipped your vote with a commentary on small government and crime. Quoting him, what about starting with asking if the candidate is a decent human being, focusing on the issues and not the candidate is dangerous, especially with the current candidates? I'm unsubscribing. I'm sad about that, Todd, and yet that is your prerogative. I really appreciate your explanation. There were a couple of other reasons that were more important, but as a hobbyist, those are the ones I'm concerned about. If you ask which candidate is a decent human being, you'll get 40% of people saying one of them is not decent, and another 40% will say the other one is not decent. They'll define decent the way they want to. So I'm not focusing on the issues to the exclusion of the candidate. I think you've got to look at the policies, the party, and the person. And what you get with that combination is tricky, it's complicated, and lesser of evils. I'm going to do the one that'll be least bad. Thank you for your comment, Todd. Another one that just said he thought it was a pathetic excuse, just giving talking points rather than actual facts. He said, do some actual research before providing biased opinions. 15 minutes of nothing, I will not get back. So it's a 1-star review. I don't get that many reviews because I don't push it. The podcast is my chance to say some things, and I hope that people will subscribe if they want to. I don't push that, and I don't push reviews, but hopefully I've had a lot of people really enjoy what they do. First of all, it was a 12-minute episode because I didn't want to go on and on about this. I have plenty of research, and yet I don't have research within the hobby. The biased opinion I have is from being a hobbyist for 60 years and thinking this is what I think it's good for the hobby. So over 12 minutes, I'm trying not to give facts because there's no such thing as a political fact anymore. I'm not really even giving the talking points. Then I wound up with saying I want to avoid regulation and make sure that crime does not pay. But thank you, even a 1-star review, as long as he's backing up with his opinion. Again, not a fact, but an opinion, but opinion's still valuable and appreciated. Beansball Card Blog, Ken, frequent contributor. He said he was watching a video of a box opening for a Sportflix box, and it was mentioning they were listed in the Beckett baseball magazines. And he said, is that your recollection? Well, yes, it is my recollection. Basically, when sets came out, we wanted to give them a chance. And so if you don't list them, then they're out of sight, out of mind. Sportflix, I liked the people involved. They were major manufacturers, standard distribution, but ultimately it was not considered mainstream. So they were in there for a number of years, and then they got crowded out. A little bit gimmicky, never really caught on. It really was a premium product at a time when the hobby wasn't ready for it. Mr. J. Mangini, I'm pretty sure I know who that is. He said he liked the 10 listener questions. Mr. J. Jonathan Mangini, and what you've suggested, because I know you're such a vintage guy, I'd love to get you on and visit with you and do dueling questions with you, but you've caused me to consider I maybe should do a vintage listener question and accumulate those, and that would be of interest, because usually there's a few vintage things each time. Okay, next from Redbird, talking about dating the cup, the Upper Deck episode where I tried to explain why sometimes there would be a good reason, a business reason, a rational reason why some of these products are dated in a way that seems ancient. It's 2 years later. Basically, he thinks hockey culture has dictated that the releases, because of the big jump from, he says, CHL and NCAA and AHL to the NHL. So he likes late releases. I think, Redbird, the checklists are pretty much either completely determined, or at least it's determined who you cannot produce in your product. But I take your point, and I agree. When they're not going after the fact and put in rookies that cards that never were, I'm fine with it. But it is confusing, and confusion is not good. And I've related that back to Upper Deck. From Stuke, we talked about value box diving, going through it. I saw him at the show again this past weekend. He got some $5 autographs out of a box, a $5 box. And he said a bunch of them came back authentic, including some Hall of Famers. I just want to say, if you buy a $5 autograph that's not authenticated, then the cost of authentication is something. If you're going to slab it or get an LOA or a sticker, and that can make the $5 a $15 or $20 item. And then if you're going to make money on that, if you got to put it on eBay or ComC, still make money, but you have to consider what it would be. But thanks for the question. Okay, this is from an English teacher who's a baseball card guy. He said he's had a question for many years. He's talking about the T206 Honus Wagner. He said, I was wondering how the tobacco production process assembly line allowed for only a small amount of cards to be printed and then stuffed into packages, and then how the company was able to successfully halt the process so that only a few cards were released to the public. Is there a source I can go to about this? Do you know the answer? Regards, Matt. Matt, I was not there, so in that sense, I do not know the answer, but being somewhat familiar with printing technology and being around for a long time, T206 was not a set. It is many sets. There were many factories, many backs. Each factory had a back, And I believe that the cards were printed by backs. There'd be a sheet of whatever the backs were, and then they were chopped up and delivered to the cigarette factory, where they were probably hand inserted into the packs. Therefore, if that's the case, it's not like there's 24 cards sitting there that are randomly inserted. It's only the ones from that factory. And if there's a lawsuit threatened by Honus Wagner, then they're going to pull that stack. I believe it was hand insert. I don't think they necessarily went in and pulled cards that had already been inserted, because I think this was probably a just-in-time thing on a big scale, but still hand done. Next, from my friend Ben Bram, postcard guy, and lots of curious things he does. He found on eBay a McCarthy, which was a prolific producer of postcards, Clementi postcard, and it's authenticated by BAS, by Beckett. He said, but the player's signature is a facsimile. It appears they authenticated the personalizing remarks up in the corner and not the facsimile autograph. He said, I know you're not the company anymore, but wanted your opinion. Ben, I take your point. I don't like it. I do think, from my understanding of Clementi's autographing things, yes, it's obviously a facsimile autograph on the bottom of the postcard as they come with that. But then in a different color ink, there was a personalization to the person by Roberto. And I believe the authentication is suggesting that they believe that the personalization writing is, it's like getting a handwritten letter with somebody with a facsimile. It's still a handwritten letter. So I think the company, if I were still in charge, I'd make sure it was way more explicit on the label. You can see in the eBay listing, the person is being very careful not to overstate what he has, but it's still a big price for a facsimile autograph with just a few words that Clemente, I think, probably wrote. Next, from Larry, he said he appreciated the Mr. Mint Entourage episode. He said, I bought from many of those dealers. He said, the only interaction I had with Mr. Mint was at the St. Louis National. My brother and I were told to move on as we were crowding his space. I've mentioned that for most of the time, I had a very positive relationship with Alan Rosen, Mr. Mint. When he was at a show, he was there to buy. He was not at the show to sell. And if you walked up empty-handed to his table and you were a kid, if you'd walked up with a suitcase or a big box that was from your dad or your grandfather, he would have been very welcoming. But he wasn't there to sell, and that's why we did the episode about the entourage. The other people sold. He distributed out. And then finally, number 10 from Shannon, how can I get your autograph? Going from being canceled and 1-star reviews to somebody wants the autograph, but I'm happy to do that. He said, I'd like you to sign my first Beckett magazine. Not sure what sport that is, but I'm easy. Now, I do expect people to send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, but I am free. Hobbies bless me, so I'm happy to pay it forward and give it back. Now, don't send me a case of them, but you can send it to 5600 West Lovers Lane, Suite 116-301, and that's Dallas, Texas 75209. So again, happy to sign, honored to sign. Just send it securely packed and put in the return envelope or postage so that I can sign it and send it back. Thanks, everybody. Positive or negative comments or questions. I'm here to provide a record, and you're helping me do that. So thanks again, and I'll see you in a couple days.
The man in the house who